Hey everyone, I'm Zach from Empress Effects, and today we're going to be looking at how to EQ a bass to make it sit in a mix. Bass frequencies in particular are super important to a mix, whether that's a live mix or a studio one. Depending on what other instruments are in the mix, your bass may be competing with them in the areas that they dominate. For example, the fundamental of a kick drum is usually between 50 to 80 hertz, so if you're to push that frequency range in your bass, you would remove any separation between your bass and the kick drum, contributing to a really boomy mix that makes everything hard to hear. Then there's also the fact that a lot of gigging bassists are going to need to be able to play a bunch of different genres night after night, and each genre is going to have its own sonic signature. Leaving your EQ set for last night's jazz gig is probably not going to cut it in tonight's Creed gig. Learning the secrets to EQ will have you prepared for any scenario. For today's demo, we'll be using our brand new Bass ParaEq, but of course you can use whatever EQ pedal you have access to or any plugin that you have in your DAW. So let's head into our DAW and start mixing this proggy tune that I wrote. So right off the bat, the bass is feeling very separated from the other instruments. So what we're going to need to do is sculpt the bass tone so that it fits in better with them. The first thing that we're going to do is remove the unwanted frequencies that don't necessarily affect the tone of the bass. This is going to make sure that the bass doesn't encroach on other instruments whose dominant frequencies are above or below it, like a kick drum or cymbals. Let's start by soloing the bass track so we can better hear what we're listening to. So if we look at the frequency graph for just the bass track, we can see energy in this sub 62 hertz zone. The low E string on a bass is around 40 hertz, so anything below that frequency is mostly going to be thump from hitting the strings. To make sure that we're only pulling out this unneeded low energy, we're just going to dial up the high pass filter on our ParaEq until we start to affect the actual tone of our bass, and then back off slightly. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with our high frequencies. Usually anything above 6 kilohertz is reserved for like vocals and cymbals and sometimes synths, so we're just going to go ahead and take that out of our bass track to make sure we're not cluttering that area. So before we start doing additive EQ by pushing certain frequencies that we want to hear more of, we should be removing all of the frequencies that we don't want to hear. So whenever I listen to the mix, I still hear some muddiness, and luckily we've included in the manual for the Bass ParaEq this frequency regions descriptions chart. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to find the muddy region is 250 to 500 hertz, so we're going to go ahead and pull that out of the bass. So I'm going to set a narrow Q on my midband, push the mid gain all the way up, then start to scrub between 250 and 500 hertz to find exactly where I'm hearing this muddiness. Even with it out, I can still hear a bit of mud, so I'll just broaden my Q until it's all gone. Okay, so now we can finally start adding things. I want to add some more pick definition so that the bass fits better with the guitar. So I've checked with my manual again, and it says that between 3 to 5 kilohertz is where pick attack comes from. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the mids. Start with a narrow Q, boost the gain way up, and then move the frequency around until we find exactly where we want to boost. So, I don't think it sounds that bad in the first section, but as we get into that second section, the bass starts moving around, and I think it needs a little bit more presence to stand out in the mix. The Bass ParaEq has a high shelf centered at around 1 kilohertz, which is exactly where I'd want to push for this, as that's the area where the bass gets its bite from. So it's actually sounding pretty good, but it still seems like it's missing a little bit of low-end information. Like there's a kick drum and then nothing else until you hit the mids. So to fill in that middle section where there's going to be some warmth, we're going to use the low shelf filter. On the Bass ParaEq, it's actually an adaptive filter that increases the frequency as you increase the gain. So, for example, if you have your pot turned to the first dot, you're boosting just a bit of 75 Hz and below. If you turn that pot all the way clockwise, you'll apply a lot of boost to 400 Hz and below. Why that helps us here is that we can boost just the fundamental frequencies of our bass instead of getting up into that muddy region that most low shelf filters will affect. So that's close, but I really want those first low notes to pop in the mix. Let's use the parametric band and dial some of that in. So it's nearly perfect, but I wish there was a little bit more grit out of the bass so that it would glue better with the guitars. So the Bass ParaEq has 30 dB of clean boost in it, and I think that would be more than enough to push our amp sim into overdrive. All right, now I'm just going to toggle between having the ParaEq on and off to hear the difference. So obviously that needs a little bit of leveling, but I'm hoping you can hear just how much we were able to transform our bass sound by using a little bit of EQ. And just so we're clear, all you're hearing is our bass track going into the ParaEq, and then that's going into our Fractal FM3 amp modeler. So there's no post EQ or compression. That's just bass into pedal into amp. Well, that about does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll have some more videos coming out over the next couple of weeks that show how to EQ for different settings, but we'll keep it a little bit more stripped back and just show the ParaEq and how it's affecting stuff. That said, if this longer form video was helpful and you'd like to see more of it, just let us know down below. You know, all that YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, comment. Have a good one.